The Galactic Council had been watching the stars for thousands of years. 47 different alien species had joined together to create peace across the galaxy. They traveled in ships that were small and fast, built to move quickly between the stars. Most of their military ships were about 200 meters long, roughly the size of 2 football fields placed end to end. Their transport ships were even smaller, rarely bigger than 100 meters. The aliens believed that smaller ships were better because they used less fuel and cost less to build. Commander Zixthor belonged to a species called the Valations. He had 4 eyes and scales that changed color with his mood. He commanded a patrol ship called the Swift Talon, which was considered large among council vessels at 240 meters. On this day, he was reviewing reports from the outer edges of known space when his sensor officer made a strange discovery. The sensor officer's scales turned purple with worry. She looked at her screen again and again, not believing what she saw. Finally, she spoke to the commander and told him about a vessel at the edge of their scanning range. The computer was showing impossible numbers. The ship appeared to be over 3 kilometers long. Zixthor felt his heart beat faster. 3 kilometers was impossible. Even the ancient space stations left behind by the mysterious progenitor race were rarely that big. The biggest structure the Council had ever built was barely 1 kilometer across. This had to be a mistake in the sensors. He ordered his crew to check all the equipment and run the scans again. The sensor officer worked quickly, her claws moving across her control panel. Minutes passed slowly while everyone on the bridge waited. When she looked up, her scales had turned white with shock. The readings were correct. There really was a ship out there, and it was 3.2 kilometers long and 800 meters wide. The mass readings were so high that their computers could not even calculate them properly. Zixthor ordered his crew to open a communication channel on all frequencies. Static filled the bridge for a moment before a voice answered. The voice spoke in perfect galactic standard language, which was surprising since this was supposed to be an unknown ship. The voice identified itself as Captain Derek Morrison from something called the United Earth Starship, Valor. The human captain said they came in peace and wanted to know how to properly introduce themselves. To the Galactic Council, the word Earth made Zixthor pause. The Council had discovered a new species in that area of space only recently. They were called humans, and the Council had been planning to send a diplomatic mission to visit them eventually. But now the humans had come to them first, and they had brought a ship that was larger than anything the Council had ever seen. Zixthor tried to keep his voice calm as he introduced himself. He welcomed the human ship to Council space, but he had to ask about the size of the vessel. Was their sensor reading actually correct? The human captain laughed, which was a sound Zixthor had never heard before. It was a strange noise that seemed to indicate happiness or amusement. Captain Morrison confirmed that yes, the readings were accurate. The Valor was indeed that large. Then the human said something that made Zixthor's breathing stop for a moment. The captain explained that the Valor was just a standard exploration cruiser. It was a normal ship for humans, nothing special. They had been searching for other intelligent life in the universe for a long time, and were happy to finally find someone. Standard exploration cruiser. Those 3 words echoed in Zixthor's mind. If this massive ship was just a standard vessel for humans, what did their actual warships look like? What kind of species built ships this enormous for simple exploration? The Valation commander realized that the galaxy had just changed in a very big way. He sent a priority message to the Council headquarters, marking it as urgent. Then he invited Captain Morrison to follow him to a nearby station, where they could meet in person. The human agreed politely. As the Swift Talon began to move, Zixthor watched his sensors track the Valor. The human ship moved smoothly through space, its massive engines pushing it forward with surprising grace for something so large. During the 3-day journey to the Council station, Zixthor learned more about humans through conversations with Captain Morrison. The humans seemed friendly and eager to share information. They told him about their planet Earth, a world with vast oceans and diverse life. They explained that they had only recently developed the technology to travel faster than light, and had been exploring their region of space for about 50 years. The more Zixthor learned, the more confused he became. Humans did not seem aggressive or warlike. They talked about art, music, science, and philosophy. They were curious about other species and asked many questions about the Council. They seemed genuinely excited about the possibility of making friends with aliens. So why did they build such enormous ships? When Zixthor asked this question directly, Captain Morrison explained that humans had developed their space travel technology alone, without any help or knowledge from other species. Their faster-than-light engines were less efficient than the ones used by council ships. Human vessels needed more fuel, more supplies, and more backup systems. They built large ships because long journeys into deep space required them to carry everything they might need. This explanation made sense, but it still left Zixthor worried. Efficiency could be learned and improved. What concerned him was the scale of human thinking. They did not just build one big ship to test their ideas. They built many. Captain Morrison had mentioned that there were 12 ships like the Valor currently exploring different parts of space. If humans built 12 exploration ships this size, how many warships did they have? How many cargo ships? How many colony vessels? As the swift Talon approached the council station with the Valor following behind, Zixthor knew that the peaceful life of the Galactic Council was about to change forever. The arrival of humanity would force every species to reconsider their assumptions about ship design, military power, and what was possible in the vastness of space. 3 days after the first contact, the Galactic Council gathered for an emergency meeting. The council chamber was a massive room designed to hold representatives from all 47 member species. Some aliens needed tanks of water to survive. Others required special atmospheres or different gravity levels. The chamber had been built to accommodate every possible need, making it one of the most complex structures in council space. Ambassador Kyle Harris stood in the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon him. He was a man in his early 50s with gray hair and a calm demeanor. Next to him stood Lieutenant Grace Chen, a young woman who specialized in languages and communication. She had spent the last 3 days learning as much as possible about the various alien languages and customs. Kyle began his speech by thanking the council for agreeing to meet with him so quickly. He told them that humanity had dreamed about this moment for centuries. Humans had always wondered if they were alone in the universe, and finding the council answered that question in the most wonderful way possible. He spoke about Earth and human culture, trying to help the aliens understand his species better. The High Chancellor, a creature named Vorn from the Hive Collective, listened carefully. Vorn looked like a giant insect with multiple arms and eyes that reflected light in rainbow patterns. He was old and wise, having served on the council for over 30 years. When Kyle finished his introduction, Vorn leaned forward and addressed the issue that every council member was thinking about. Vorn explained that while the council was pleased to meet humanity, there was a serious concern. The Valor was larger than any ship in council space. Some species feared that such a large vessel indicated that humans might be aggressive or planning to invade. The High Chancellor's voice was gentle but firm. He needed Kyle to explain why humans built such enormous ships. Kyle had expected this question. He glanced at Grace, who gave him an encouraging nod. He took a deep breath and began his explanation. He told the council that the Valor was not a warship. It was designed for exploration and could even serve as a colony ship if needed. The vessel was built for missions that might last years or even decades far from Earth. Human military ships were different, but humanity wanted only peace and friendship with the council. A representative from the Aquarian species spoke next. Her name was Counselor Thera, and she lived in a large tank filled with blue liquid. Her voice came through a translator device. She asked Kyle a direct question. If the Valor was not a warship, why was it so large? Council military vessels averaged about 200 meters in length. Their largest colony ships were only 300 meters. The Valor was more than 10 times bigger than that. Why Kyle knew this was the critical moment. He explained that the difference came from how humans had developed space travel. Humanity had grown up alone, without knowledge of other species or their technology. Humans built their ships large because they had no choice. Their faster-than-light engines were less efficient than council technology. Human ships needed more fuel, more supplies, and more redundancy in their systems. They built for journeys that might take years, carrying everything they could possibly need because they had no one to call for help. Another counselor asked if humans would now adopt council technology and build smaller ships. Kyle admitted that eventually this might happen. However, humans had already built hundreds of large vessels. The Valor was just one of 12 exploration cruisers currently in service. Humanity also had cargo vessels that were twice as large as the Valor, and their colony ships were even bigger. The chamber became noisy as aliens began talking among themselves in dozens of different languages. Some sounded angry, others fearful, and a few seemed curious. Chancellor Vorn raised one of his blade-like arms and called for silence. When the chamber quieted down, he asked Kyle a simple question in a soft voice. How large were the human colony ships? Kyle met the High Chancellor's many eyes and told him the truth. The largest human colony ships, called the New Horizon class, measured 15 kilometers in length. These ships were designed to carry entire communities into deep space, holding everything needed to start a new civilization on a distant planet. 15 kilometers. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. No one spoke. No one moved. The council members simply stared at Kyle, trying to process what they had just heard. Some alien skin colors changed. Others made small noises of distress. A few seemed to stop breathing altogether. Kyle understood their shock. He tried to explain further. He told them that these colony ships were like mobile cities. They carried farms, factories, hospitals, and schools. They were designed to be completely self-sufficient for decades or even generations. Humans had built them this way because they thought they might never find other intelligent life. They prepared for the possibility of being alone forever, of needing to spread across the galaxy using only their own resources. But the council was not ready to hear more explanations. Chancellor Vorn called for a recess, asking Kyle and Grace to wait in a nearby room while the council discussed the situation privately. As the two humans left the chamber, they could hear the eruption of voices behind them. In the waiting room, Grace sat down heavily in a chair. She looked at Kyle with worried eyes and asked if he thought they had made a mistake by being so honest. Maybe they should have introduced humanity more slowly, revealing the size of their ships gradually over time. Kyle shook his head. He told her that honesty was the only path forward. If they had tried to hide the truth, the council would have felt betrayed when they eventually learned about it. It was better to be open now and deal with the fear directly. Yes, the aliens were shocked and scared, but they were also rational beings who had formed a peaceful confederation. They would work through their fear and find a way forward. Grace asked what would happen if the council decided that humans were too dangerous. What if they demanded that humanity stay away from council space and never make contact again? Kyle did not have a good answer for that question. He could only hope that the council would see past their fear to the opportunity that friendship with humanity represented. Hours passed slowly. Finally, a message arrived asking Kyle and Grace to return to the council chamber. When they entered, they found the atmosphere had changed. The aliens still looked concerned, but there was something else in their expressions now. Curiosity, perhaps, or cautious interest. 2 weeks had passed since Ambassador Kyle Harris first addressed the Galactic Council. During that time, tensions had remained high. The council held meeting after meeting, debating what to do about humanity. Some species argued that humans should be kept away from council space completely. They said that any species that built such enormous ships could not be trusted. Other species disagreed, seeing opportunities for trade and cultural exchange. But underneath all the debates, fear remained the dominant emotion. Captain Derek Morrison sat in the conference room aboard the Valor, reading the latest reports from the diplomatic team. With him were Commander Lisa Park, his second-in-command, and Chief Engineer Ben Tucker. Ben's team had been answering hundreds of questions from curious aliens about how human ships worked. Derek put down his data pad and sighed. He told his officers that the council had made a formal request. They wanted to see a human warship. They wanted detailed specifications and, if possible, a demonstration of human military capabilities. The council needed to understand what humanity was capable of in terms of warfare. Lisa leaned back in her chair and said she understood why the council was afraid. Humans had shown up in ships that were much larger than anything the aliens had ever built. Of course, they worried about an invasion. She said she would probably feel the same way if the situation was reversed. Ben pointed out that showing the council an actual warship would probably make things worse, not better. Human military vessels were even larger than exploration ships like the Valor. They were built on the principle that survivability required mass, armor, and backup systems. The smallest human warship currently in service was the treaty cruiser Ross, which measured 4 kilometers long. The battleships were even bigger. Lisa suggested keeping the warships classified. Maybe they could tell the council that military specifications were secret. Derek shook his head. He said that if they refused to show their military ships, the Council would assume the worst. The aliens would imagine weapons and capabilities far beyond what humans actually possessed. No, they needed to be honest and show the Council what they had. They needed to explain why human warships were designed the way they were. A communication alert interrupted their discussion. The face of Admiral Frank Carter appeared on the screen. The Admiral was in his 60s with gray hair and a serious expression. He was a veteran officer who had served in the military for over 40 years. He told Derek that he had been following the diplomatic situation closely. The Council wanted to see human military power, and they were about to get exactly that. The battleship Titan was being sent to their location and would arrive in 6 days. Derek felt his stomach tighten with worry. He asked the Admiral if sending the Titan was really a wise decision. She was one of the largest warships humanity had ever built. The Admiral replied that this was precisely why they were sending her. Humanity needed to establish clear boundaries with the Council. The aliens needed to understand that while humans wanted peace, they were not helpless or weak. The Titan would make that point very clear. Then the Admiral ended the communication. The room was quiet for a moment. Lisa whistled softly and said the Titan was 8 kilometers of pure military power. The Council was going to panic when they saw her. Derek muttered that this was exactly what he was afraid of. Over the next 6 days, Derek tried to prepare the Council for what was coming. He sent messages explaining that the Titan was a defensive vessel, built to protect human space from unknown threats. He emphasized that humanity had never fought an interstellar war because they had never encountered another spacefaring species until now. All of human military doctrine was theoretical, designed to deal with possibilities rather than actual enemies. But words could only do so much. When the day arrived for the Titan to appear, Derek knew that no amount of explanation would truly prepare the aliens for what they were about to see. The Galactic Council assembled a fleet at neutral coordinates far from any inhabited system. 40 ships gathered, representing the combined military strength of the Council's most powerful members. Commander Zixthor was there in his ship, the Swift Talon. Vessels from dozens of species waited in formation, their crews nervous and alert. On the Council command ship, Ambassador Kyle stood with Chancellor Vorn and other high-ranking officials. They all watched the main view screen, waiting for the human warship to arrive. Kyle told them that the Titan should be arriving soon. Captain Helen Brooks, who commanded the Titan, was known for being very punctual. Suddenly, alarms began beeping on multiple consoles. A new contact was detected emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of their sensor range. The Velation sensor operator's scales flickered through many colors as she announced the readings. The vessel measured 8.3 kilometers long and 1.6 kilometers wide. Its mass was approximately 200 million tons. Her voice shook as she gave these numbers. On the view screen, a shape began to appear. The Titan emerged from the distortion of FTL travel like an ancient god of war. She was a mountain of metal and composite armor, angular and brutal in design. Weapon systems covered her hull, visible even from a great distance. Railguns, missile launchers, and energy weapons bristled from every surface. Point defense systems dotted the ship like scales on a dragon. Every alien on the Council command ship stood frozen in shock. Some stopped breathing. Others made small sounds of fear or amazement. The Titan moved forward slowly, her massive bulk gliding through space with surprising grace. Smaller ships moved out of her path, not because she threatened them, but because the psychological impact of her presence was overwhelming. She positioned herself next to the Valor, and the comparison was striking. The exploration cruiser, which had seemed impossibly large just 2 weeks ago, now looked almost modest beside her larger military cousin. A communication came through from the Titan. Captain Helen Brooks identified herself and requested permission to approach for diplomatic observation. Chancellor Vorn's mandibles clicked rapidly, which Kyle had learned was a sign of stress in his species. The High Chancellor granted permission and welcomed the human warship to Council space, though his voice sounded strained. A shuttle detached from the Titan's hangar bay. Even the shuttle was large by Council standards, nearly 50 meters long. It approached the command ship and docked smoothly. A few minutes later, Captain Helen Brooks entered the bridge. She was a tall woman in her mid-40s with short dark hair and an air of confidence. She wore a black and silver uniform and saluted crisply when she saw the assembled officials. Helen thanked them for agreeing to this demonstration. She said she understood they had questions about human military capabilities. Chancellor Vorn slowly repeated the word questions as if testing how it tasted. Yes, he said, they had many questions. His first question was about crew size. How many people did it take to operate a ship like the Titan? Helen explained that the Titan had a crew of 4,500 personnel. The ship carried fighters, ground troops, and enough supplies to operate independently for 3 years without resupply. A counselor from the back of the room asked about weapons, his voice tight with tension. Helen remained professional as she listed the Titan's armaments. 64 heavy rail cannons, 240-point defense systems, 112 missile tubes capable of firing both conventional and nuclear weapons, and 12 directed energy weapons for close-range combat. The ship also carried 80 strike fighters in its hangars. The silence that followed was complete and heavy. The silence in the Council command ship felt heavy enough to touch. Captain Helen Brooks stood calmly before the assembled alien representatives, waiting for their response to her description of the Titan's capabilities. She could see fear in many of their expressions, though the emotions looked different on each species. Some had changed colors, others had stopped moving entirely, and a few were making small, distressed sounds. Ambassador Kyle Harris decided to intervene before the fear could turn into panic. He spoke up and suggested that Captain Brooks explain to the Council why human ships were designed this way. Why did humans build on such an enormous scale? Helen understood what Kyle was trying to do and nodded her thanks to him. She turned to face Chancellor Vorn and the other counselors directly. She told them that humanity had spent centuries confined to a single star system. During that time, humans fought among themselves while dreaming about traveling to other worlds. When they finally developed faster-than-light technology, they did it independently without any help or knowledge from other species. Human FTL drives were inefficient compared to Council technology. They required massive power cores, extensive fuel reserves, and heavy shielding just to function properly. Humans built big ships because they had no other choice. Helen gestured toward the view screen where the Titan dominated the view. She explained that the battleship was designed to survive anything they might encounter in deep space. Meteor strikes, radiation storms, equipment failures, unknown threats, all of these dangers had to be considered. Humans built for redundancy because they were alone and afraid. Every critical system on the Titan had 3 backup systems. Every important component could be replaced using the ship's machine shops. The vessel carried enough spare parts to rebuild half of itself if necessary. Chancellor Vorn spoke quietly, pointing out that humans were no longer alone. They had found the Council and other intelligent species. Helen agreed with him. Yes, humanity had found friends among the stars. In time, human ship designs would change and evolve. They would learn from Council technology and adapt their methods. They would build more efficiently, but that process would take decades. The ships that existed now, including the Titan, represented humanity's first uncertain steps into the galaxy. They were overbuilt, overarmed, and oversized. But these characteristics had kept humans alive when they had no one else to turn to for help. A counselor from a species called the Crystalline Accord asked a thoughtful question. If human ships were built for survival rather than conquest, could Captain Brooks explain their military doctrine? What situations did humans envision using these weapons? Helen appreciated the question because it got to the heart of the matter. She explained that human military planning was entirely theoretical. Humanity had never fought an interstellar war. All of their battle strategies were designed around hypothetical situations and unknown enemies. The Titan's weapons were meant to defend against threats that humans had imagined but never encountered. Pirates taking over cargo ships, hostile aliens invading human colonies, space monsters attacking vessels. All of these scenarios existed only in human imagination and fiction. The reality was that until 2 weeks ago, humans thought they might be completely alone in the universe. This explanation seemed to help some of the counselors relax slightly. The idea that human weapons had never been used in actual combat was reassuring. But questions continued. How many ships like the Titan did humanity possess? Were there larger warships? What about smaller, faster attack vessels? Helen answered honestly. Humanity currently had 5 battleships of the Titan class. They had 12 heavy cruisers like the Ross that were about 4 kilometers long. They possessed 46 destroyers of various sizes, ranging from 2 to 3 kilometers in length. For smaller, faster vessels, humanity had about 200 corvettes that were each roughly 500 meters long. These were the smallest military ships humans built, and even they were larger than most Council warships. The numbers clearly disturbed the Council members, but Helen continued. She explained that these ships were spread across human space, which covered approximately 50 star systems. Most of the vessels spent their time on patrol or conducting training exercises. The military existed primarily to provide emergency rescue services and to deal with the occasional pirates or criminals who operated in remote areas far from law enforcement. Ambassador Kyle added that humanity would be happy to share detailed information about their military structure and capabilities. Transparency would help build trust between humans and the Council. He suggested that Council observers could visit human military bases and even serve aboard human ships if they wished. This offer seemed to surprise many of the aliens, but Kyle could see interest in their expressions. Over the following days, the Council began to relax slightly. Small groups of aliens visited the Titan, touring its corridors and meeting its crew. They saw the living quarters where 4,000 humans spent their time. They visited the hydroponics bays where food was grown. They examined the medical facilities, the machine shops, and the training areas. Everywhere they went, they found humans who were friendly and eager to share information. Commander Zixthor spent an entire day aboard the Titan, and the experience changed his perspective completely. He had expected a warship to feel cold and threatening. Instead, he found a community. Humans worked together in tight-knit teams. They laughed and joked with each other during breaks. They showed pride in their ship and their duties, but they did not seem aggressive or violent. When Zixthor asked crew members about combat, most admitted they hoped they would never have to fight anyone. They saw their jobs as protecting human civilians and helping people in trouble. One young human officer named Pete showed Zixthor the fighter bays where the 80 small combat craft were stored. Pete explained that he was a pilot, and his main job was conducting search and rescue missions. He had saved 17 people in the past 3 years, pulling them from damaged ships or failed space stations. He had never fired his weapons at another vessel. When Zixthor asked if Pete would be willing to fight if ordered, the young man became serious. He said yes, he would fight to protect innocent people if necessary, but he really hoped it would never come to that. These interactions helped the Council understand that the Titan, despite its enormous size and fearsome weapons, was crewed by ordinary people who wanted the same things the Council wanted: peace, prosperity, and the chance to explore the universe safely. The ship was not a tool of conquest. It was a mobile home for thousands of humans who had volunteered to spend years in space protecting their civilization. Captain Helen Brooks met with Chancellor Vorn privately near the end of the week. The High Chancellor admitted that his initial fear had been overwhelming. When he first saw the Titan, he thought humanity might be planning to conquer the entire galaxy. But after meeting the crew and learning about human culture, he realized his assumptions had been wrong. Humans built big ships for the same reason his species built elaborate hive structures. It was simply their nature to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. Vorn asked Helen what humanity wanted from the Council. What were their goals and hopes for the future? Helen thought carefully before answering. She said that humans wanted friendship and knowledge. They wanted to learn from the Council's thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. They wanted to share their own discoveries and capabilities. And most of all, they wanted to not be alone anymore. For so long, humans had stared at the stars wondering if anyone else was out there. Finding the Council had answered the greatest question in human history. Now they just wanted to be part of something larger than themselves. The High Chancellor's mandibles moved in the expression Helen had learned meant satisfaction or approval. He told her that the Council would need time to make official decisions, but he personally believed that humanity deserved a place among the stars. 3 months had passed since humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council. 3 months of meetings, demonstrations, cultural exchanges, and slowly building bridges of trust. The Titan remained in Council space, her crew becoming familiar faces to dozens of alien species. Human and alien children exchanged messages through the communication networks. Scientists from both sides collaborated on research projects. Cooks shared recipes, artists showed their work, and musicians discovered that some forms of beauty transcended species. Captain Derek Morrison walked through the corridors of Harmony Point Station, marveling at how much things had changed. When he first arrived here months ago, aliens would see him coming and quickly move to the other side of the hallway. Now they greeted him with waves, chirps, color changes, and various other friendly gestures. Children of several species would sometimes run up to him asking questions about Earth or wanting to see pictures of human animals. The fear had not completely disappeared, but it had transformed into something better: respect, curiosity, and genuine friendship. Derek arrived at Conference Room 7 where a special meeting had been called. Inside, he found Ambassador Kyle Harris, Captain Helen Brooks, and Commander Lisa Park waiting. Several important council members were also present, including High Chancellor Vorn. The atmosphere felt different from previous meetings. There was an energy in the air, a sense of anticipation. Chancellor Vorn began the meeting by thanking Derek for joining them. He said there was much to discuss and important decisions to announce. Derek took his seat, nodding politely to the assembled group. He felt nervous but hopeful. The past 3 months had gone well, but he knew the council could still decide to keep humanity at a distance. Vorn continued speaking, and his words made Derek's heart beat faster. The Galactic Council had voted and reached a decision. They wanted to extend a formal invitation to humanity. The council was offering humans associate membership in their confederation. This was an incredible honor and a clear sign that the council trusted humanity, despite the initial fear and uncertainty. Kyle's eyes widened with surprise and happiness. He told the High Chancellor that humanity was deeply honored by this offer. It was more than they had dared to hope for, but he also asked about the terms and conditions. Surely there would be requirements that humanity needed to meet. A counselor from the crystalline accord species spoke next. She explained that yes, there were conditions, but they were beneficial for everyone. The council wanted humanity to share its construction techniques and engineering knowledge. Many council species faced challenges that human shipbuilding methods might solve. For example, some species wanted to conduct long-range exploration into the dangerous galactic core region. Others needed deep space research stations that could operate far from any support. Human experience with building large, self-sufficient vessels could help make these projects possible. Chancellor Vorn expanded on this idea. He said that what humans saw as a disadvantage, the council now saw as an opportunity. Human ships were large because they were built for survival and self-sufficiency. These were valuable characteristics. The Hive Collective had already submitted a formal request for human engineers to help design a new generation of colony ships. The Aquarian Commonwealth wanted to build deep space research vessels that could explore areas too distant for regular resupply missions. Several other species had similar requests. Captain Helen Brooks leaned forward with interest. She asked about military cooperation. Surely the council still had concerns about human warships and their capabilities. Vorn acknowledged that yes, military matters were still a concern, but the council had developed a proposal that they believed would work well for everyone. The High Chancellor explained the plan. They wanted to create a joint task force, a combined fleet with vessels from both council species and humanity working together. Human ships would serve as command and support vessels, using their size and endurance to provide a stable platform for operations. Council ships, which were faster and more maneuverable, would handle patrol duties and rapid response situations. By combining their strengths, they could create a force that was better than either side could build alone. Derek understood the logic immediately. It was integration rather than competition. The council was not asking humans to give up their large ships or reduce their military. Instead, they wanted to work together, using the advantages of both approaches. It was a smart solution that addressed everyone's concerns. Kyle looked at the other human officers, seeing the same emotion reflected in their faces that he felt. This was hope. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for generations. They were not just finding other intelligent life. They were being welcomed into a community that spanned the stars. Speaking formally, Kyle told the council that on behalf of humanity, they accepted the invitation with gratitude. Humanity looked forward to learning from the council's 12,000 years of accumulated wisdom and contributing what they could to their shared future. It would be an honor to work together. Chancellor Vorn's mandibles spread, and what humans had learned was the Velation equivalent of a smile. He said that they should begin immediately. There was much work to do, and now they would do it together. The future belonged to all of them. Later that evening, Derek stood in the observation deck of the Valor. He looked out at the assembled fleet through the large windows. The Titan floated nearby, her massive hull now surrounded by dozens of smaller council ships. More vessels arrived every day as different species sent representatives to participate in the new joint initiatives. It looked almost like a family gathering, with the large human ships serving as anchors while smaller vessels moved around them. Lisa joined Derek at the window. She commented on how strange things had worked out. They had come here afraid that the Council would see them as dangerous invaders. Instead, the aliens saw them as builders and protectors. Derek smiled and said that humanity's stubborn refusal to build small ships might be the best thing that ever happened to galactic architecture. Lisa mentioned that Ambassador Kyle had told her about the project requests already coming in. 4 different species wanted human engineers to consult on megastructure projects. The Hive Collective wanted to build a space station 5 kilometers across. The Aquarians were planning a deep space observatory that would need to operate 30 light-years from the nearest inhabited system. A species called the Nomads wanted help designing generation ships for a journey to another galaxy. The requests kept coming. Derek thought about this and realized something profound. Humans had built their massive ships because they were alone and scared. They made vessels large enough to carry everything they might need, tough enough to survive anything, because they had no one to call for help if something went wrong. They prepared for the worst because they had no choice. Lisa spoke quietly, finishing his thought. She said that now humans were not alone anymore. They had found friends and allies among the stars. And these massive, overbuilt, completely excessive ships that humanity had created turned out to be exactly what the galaxy needed, not as weapons of war but as tools of cooperation, as gathering places where different species could meet and work together, as symbols that even in the vastness of space there was room for everyone. Derek nodded, feeling the truth of her words deep in his chest. The Valor hummed softly around them, her systems maintaining life for thousands of beings from dozens of different worlds. Humanity had built their ships too large, too heavily armored, too prepared for threats that never came. But in doing so, they had created something unexpected and wonderful. Not warships but arcs. Not fortresses but homes. Vessels large enough to carry not just humans but hope for an entire galaxy that was learning to dream bigger. Through the viewport, stars glittered against the darkness of space, unchanged and eternal. But among those stars now moved ships of 100 different designs, large and small, all traveling together into a future that they would build together. Humanity had reached for the stars with oversized ambitions and built their dreams too large. And the galaxy, after its initial shock and fear, had embraced them for it. The age of humanity among the stars had truly begun. Not with conquest or domination, but with an invitation to build and explore together. If their ships were too large, too excessive, too human in their scale and ambition, well, the galaxy was learning that sometimes bigger really was better. Sometimes preparing for the worst led to the best possible outcome. Sometimes being afraid and alone made you build exactly what everyone needed. As Derek watched another small alien shuttle approach the Valor, coming to deliver more visitors and more opportunities for friendship, he felt grateful for every decision that had led humanity to this moment. They had built big because they were scared. Now they stood tall because they were welcomed. The future stretched out before them, vast and full of possibility, and humanity would face it alongside friends they had only dreamed existed.